This is the Litigator's Edge podcast with your host, Aniket Sawant.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Litigator's Edge, a podcast where innovative attorneys reveal the strategies that have transformed their legal practice. My name is Aniket Sawant, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Threadio. It's my pleasure to have Kim Wald as my guest today. Kim is a partner at the Haggard Law Firm, a reputed injury law firm in Florida. Kim, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Kim, I'd like to start by asking you to please share either a fun fact or a cringe joke for our audience. Which will it be and what is it?
So I did come prepared with a joke today, and I hope it's going to be cringy enough for you. I've heard in my practice that lawyers are sometimes referred to as sharks. And that's not really being very fair to sharks because sharks stop attacking you after you're dead.
Oh,
Get it?
Yes.
I'm a much better lawyer than I am comedian. So.
That's fantastic. Well, Kim, on the note of you being a great lawyer, I think of every attorney who makes the time to come on this show as a superhero, and every superhero has an origin story. What's yours?
So, my origin story is I'm born and raised here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and really wanted to come back to my community and help however I can here. I started at my prior law firm and I litigated against tobacco companies for about 10 years or so. And that took me all over the United States to Nevada, to South Florida, to Boston, and really litigating against tobacco companies strengthened my, inner beast in there that really wanted me to fight for victims and do whatever we can to make products safer, to make laws safer. And through there, I have now joined the Haggard Law Firm. I've been here for a little bit over 3 years, and we continue that mission. We focus on litigating anything personal injury. So we have a lot of, unfortunately, sexual assault cases. We handle a lot of drowning litigation, a lot of negligent security, products liability, a lot of mass shooting cases. And my passion really stems from doing what we can to help victims both inside the courtroom and outside as well through helping legislative changes and doing really whatever we can so that I'm putting myself out of business. That would be my ultimate goal, is that these clients and these horrible stories that I'm seeing just simply don't happen again.
That's wonderful, Kim. That's a unique, certainly distinguishing factor that at least I've not seen in my experience in speaking with attorneys in terms of the putting yourself out of business by making fundamental and structural reforms, or at least aiming to do so. So that's really commendable. Speaking to what you mentioned there, your firm's motto is justice for all, and you speak about obtaining justice for a client in horrific times. Can you share a case that particularly illustrates this fight for justice and that fundamentally shaped how you see your role as an advocate for victims?
Absolutely. So in 2022, there was a horrible incident here in Orlando, Florida, where a 14-year-old boy, Tyree Sampson, he went to Icon Park, which is a park right off of I-4 in Orlando, and wanted to ride one of the free fall drop towers that was operated by Slingshot. That tower is 430 feet tall. You go all the way up to the tower, it tilts forward 30 degrees, and then you drop, experiencing up to 3 or 4 G-forces as you fall down. On that horrible day when Tyree went on that ride, unfortunately, the operator, the manufacturer, the people at the park, they manipulated 2 of the seats. And the reason they manipulated them is that larger people like Tyree could fit on those seats. And they actually manipulated the safety sensor. So the bar that comes down and actually keeps you in the seat, they made up to 6 to 8 inches higher than it should have been. And so as Tyree is falling down those 430 feet at upwards of 3 Gs, he slips through the safety harness and falls hundreds of feet to his death. It was one of the most horrific videos that I have ever seen. I still see it in my head when I go to sleep at night. And our goal truly was to do everything we can for this family. So we not only were successful in reaching settlements against the park and the operators, we went even a step further. We wanted to make sure that the manufacturer of this ride, who is an Austrian company, that they were held accountable. They originally had attorneys, they came down, they did the inspections with us, And then eventually the attorneys just dropped out of the case. And they said, look, we don't want anything to do with this. And so we went to trial. We invited them to come from Austria. We invited their local attorneys. They decided not to show up. And a jury in Orange County last December held a $310 million verdict against that manufacturer for not putting in the mechanisms that they needed to make Tyree stay in that seat. But we also didn't stop there, not only with the settlement, not only with the jury verdict. We went up to Tallahassee, Florida, which is where our state legislature is. And we got a Safety Act passed in Tyree's name. Now, we wish it would have been a little bit more extensive, but it did require more regulations, more safety checks. And I think that's a really good representative of what my firm is about and what we want to do as attorneys. Not only get justice for our clients inside the courtroom, not only get them monetary compensation, but change the law so that another child is never going to be in that same position as Tyree. Another parent doesn't have to worry, oh, are they in the seat? Are they going to be able to fall out of their seat? No parent should ever have to have that conversation. And hopefully with the laws that we've implemented and we're continuing to implement, no parent will have to ask that question again.
Wow, that's such a powerful and compelling story, Kim. Thank you for sharing all of that. You state that the highest honor a lawyer can receive is to obtain a client's trust. In cases involving, such deep trauma, such as the one that I'm sure Tyree's family went through, how do you go about building that trust with clients, with members of the family and other people close to the affected person who are often at their most vulnerable?
You know, that's one of the most important goals, and it's one of the most difficult as an attorney really to learn about. My firm, along with a few others in South Florida, we had the honor of representing many of the victims from the Parkland school shooting and going to those families who just lost their 12 and 13-year-old children, going to the survivors who watched their best friend next to them die, who they themselves went through that trauma. It really is just listening and being there for them. We don't have a 9-to-5 job. When my clients need me, they have access to me. They have my cell phone number. I go to their houses. We're part of their families and part of their lives, because this trauma isn't a 9-to-5. They're not banker's hours. This trauma can hit them, and it does hit them at all hours. And we don't want it to just be there to talk about the case. We want to get to know them. We help them get the therapy that they need, whether it's church or whether it's an actual therapist or it's going on walks with them, getting a therapy animal. Every client's a little bit different. And really that is our honor, to get to know these families and do what we can to help them. And in every situation, it looks a little bit different.
Changing to another type of case that you handle, which is victims of sexual assault, that I would imagine requires a unique blend of empathy and strength and strategic acumen, right? And so, what are some of the specific challenges that you face in those kinds of cases, and what gives you an edge, do you think, in fighting for those clients?
So those type of cases and those clients, like you said, are very, very unique and are a different type of trauma. Here at the Haggard Law Firm, all of the attorneys, all of the staff are what we call trauma trained and trauma informed. And so when we know that we have a client like that who is a victim from this systematic abuse of an institution or their abuser, we need to handle that situation very differently than you would a regular car crash case. Clients like that, you need to ask their permission to share their story. They might not be ready to share their story for the first, the second, maybe even the first 5 visits. You need to ask where they're comfortable sharing it. They might not be comfortable on the phone. You might need to go to their house to share that story. They might not be comfortable with a male attorney, a female attorney. There's a lot of different intricacies that goes into that. The most important, though, is letting them share on their terms. A lot of the times when we see clients and victims of sexual assault, we're the first people that they have told this story to in their entire lives. So they haven't told their significant others, their parents, they haven't told the police yet. And so we need to be there and listen. We need to have mechanisms in place so that if they are reaching that point that they need help more than what I can provide, we have something in place for them. We don't want to re-traumatize them. And so we do everything we can to make sure that they're comfortable and they're comfortable with us, and building that trust with them is absolutely crucial, because the moment you lose that trust, then you're never going to be able to gain that client's confidence back. And that's what you need throughout the pendency of a litigation case.
It makes a lot of sense. Going from building trust with your clients, and you shared some wonderful examples of how you go about doing that, to actually convincing a jury. So I can imagine that conveying the depth of your client's trauma and loss to a jury can be challenging. Can you talk about your approach to how you actually go about doing that through your storytelling, through evidence presentation, in a way that is both impactful but also respectful of your client's experience?
Absolutely. A lot of times when you're talking about this magnitude of loss, it's difficult to put into words. Sometimes I ask my clients to step out of the room. It's sometimes too difficult for them to hear, especially if you have a client who's alive, who's a paraplegic or quadriplegic, and you have to talk to the jury about what they're going to be experiencing in the future, the type of help that they need on a day-to-day basis, even to go through their bowel routines, to help them change to the surgeries that they may have in the future. And you want to be sympathetic to your client, and you don't want them to go home and say, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And have this affect them even more deeply. So sometimes we do ask clients to step out of the room when we have to go through sensitive topics like that. But the most important to the jury, like you said, it really is storytelling. And the best way you can do that is get to know your clients. Go spend a dinner at their house with them. Every trial I have, the week before trial, if I can, the night before, I go to my client's house. I go over there around 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, do their afternoon activities with them, do their evening activities, sit down at the dinner table, sit in their house, and look at the 4 walls of their house. What is on their house? What are these pictures? What are these stories? And really knowing your client, not just having another file on your desk and memorizing their names right before it, having that personal touch, having that connection. So when you're talking, it's genuine. It's not just something that you memorized. Being genuine, being in the moment, and really telling their story from their perspective is the absolute most critical point you can have for truly getting those points across to a jury.
That's incredible. So really stepping in their shoes, understanding what their life is like, and then bringing that to your storytelling in court. That's amazing.
And it's really interesting what you could learn over a family dinner, whether it's a Friday night, a Sunday night, the stories that come out that you're not necessarily going to get when you call your client and say, okay, let's prep for trial and tell me the most meaningful story. That's not going to come out naturally. But when you're sitting in their house, flipping through their photo albums together, talking to them about, oh, what's that chip on the side of the table? What is this dog's picture that I see here? That's where you're going to get the true, genuine stories that are going to be the most impactful for a jury.
That makes a lot of sense. Beyond spending or walking a mile in your client's shoes, as you just mentioned, what innovative approaches do you and your firm take in terms of case strategy, client communication, or even presenting these stories to a jury? And, it may involve the use of technology, it may not, but can you maybe expand on that a little?
So I'm a huge technology proponent. I love, anything artificial intelligence. I am using ChatGPT, a lot of the other, mechanisms these days. I'm constantly testing out all of that new artificial intelligence. And I also love graphics and storytelling and visuals during trial. A lot of attorneys are old school and they don't want PowerPoints, anything like that. I love using PowerPoints during my closing, especially when you have some animation or a GIF or something like that. I tried a case last year, and it was a negligent security trial where one of the defendants was actually talking about the crime in their neighborhood and how it was getting to this boiling point. And so I wanted to use that image in closing. So during my closing, for about 10 minutes of my closing, I had an image on a giant screen behind me of a pot that was just boiling. And it was boiling and boiling and boiling. And I timed my closing. So just when that boil started to overflow, that's when I started talking about the crime got so bad. That's when my client got shot and killed. And tying those visuals to the storytelling, I'm a visual person, and I think it's really important and telling for a jury to have that information, because when they're back in the jury box, that visual, that's what's going to be sticking with them.
That's wonderful, and such a compelling way to just show what people might be feeling. And so that's amazing. You mentioned you're a fan of technology. How do you evaluate which technologies or approaches are worth implementing? Because there's so many out there, and some work and some don't. What's your approach?
So the first thing I do is always make sure that it's compliant with all of the rules of ethics and responsibility and all of our evidence rules as well. One of my biggest concerns being a PI lawyer is obviously HIPAA concerns. So anything on ChatGPT, I can't ever put my client's medical records, anything like that. After I get through the privacy and the HIPAA concerns, then I'm really looking for what is the best quality for whatever the price is going to be. And it really is taking a lot of testing. You know, I see all these programs and I'm like, all right, I want to take a little bit from this, a little bit from this one. That one might be too expensive. So it's really comparing them all apples to apples. And then always having your actual input and your human viewpoint in here, because you can't just rely on AI for absolutely everything. We've all heard the horror stories. I think they come out every day. I'm never going to be using it for research, never using it to replace my job as an attorney. But there are so many useful ways where it can come in and be a great assist and save you hundreds and hundreds of hours and make you a much, much more efficient attorney, litigator, and just person in general as you're working and getting through your daily task load.
That's a very nuanced take on that one. In your experience, Kim, what's the biggest misconception about integrating technology or new processes, including AI? Specifically, what resistance have you encountered, and how would you advise other attorneys to overcome it?
I think the biggest resistance is all of the negative press that it's getting, especially for these older attorneys. All they're seeing are these hallucinations and they can't trust anything. What you have to tell those attorneys is, one, obviously you can never use it to replace attorney and human verification. Any AI that I have, I want to see the verification. So if it's a depo summary and it gives me the summary, I want to see the citations back to the actual deposition. And second, hallucinations, what people don't understand is that if you give a universe of documents, right? If you put in all of your documents and if you ask the program, and it's a program that you trust to stay in that universe, then you're not going to have those problems with hallucination. But really, I think it's like anything else. People were terrified of Zoom when the pandemic hit, and look at us now. I don't think that there's a single court in the US that isn't using Zoom. So it's going to take a little bit of time. In some of the older generation, they're kind of just never going to implement it. But for any young attorney or young business professional, I think it's absolutely crucial that they learn responsible AI and that you start incorporating it in your business.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Looking ahead, knowing where we are in terms of technology within the PI space today, where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation over the next 3 to 5 years? I guess in terms of what could be of value to you as you continue advocating for clients and for justice for them.
One of the biggest innovations I really think is all the document summarization, having thousands and thousands of pages of medical records or police files or a medical dictionary, and the ability to correctly synthesize that and summarize that within a matter of seconds is a huge time saver. I mean, me going through a deposition, that might take me 3 to 4 hours to read. And if I can get a summary of that within 1 to 2 minutes, it is a tremendous save. Same thing with medical records. When I'm preparing for trial and you're going to read your 4,000 documents and pages of medical records, to have that summary and be able to know exactly what page to flip to, what pages are important and not, traditionally would take you 2 or 3 days to sit down, and human fatigue and error is coming in. And all of that, as long as you have a program that's verifiable, that's trustable, all of that is going to be a huge time saver for everybody in the future in this profession.
Makes a lot of sense. This has been a wonderful conversation, Kim. Just to wrap it up with a couple of quick questions. So you're heavily involved in bar leadership and community organizations, all while handling what was clearly an emotionally demanding caseload, while making time for evaluating all these advanced technologies off on the side. How do you manage all of that personally, professionally, and how does all of this engagement inform your practice?
So that's a great question. I think I'm still trying to figure out how I do all of this. I think, whenever I talk to young lawyers, I always say as I do, not as I say, or whatever that saying is, because I'm involved in every single organization that you can. But at the end of the day, I enjoy it. These organizations, I'm actually friends with all the individuals, and everything ties together because that's where you get cases from. That's where you learn about these technologies. And it's so important to be involved. When you have the platform that my firm has, that I've developed, it's so important to give back, because if you're not giving back, if you're not helping others, then really what's the point of any of this? And so doing all of that, being active, mentoring younger attorneys, younger associates, is absolutely critical in this business. And it all comes back together. If you do good, good will come to you. And I am an absolute firm believer of that. And I continue trying to live that way. And it's worked so far. So I don't plan on changing anytime soon.
That's fantastic, and a wonderful segue into my next question, which is that you've achieved, pretty significant level of recognition and success early in your career, Rising Star Awards, things like that. What advice would you give to other young lawyers who are aspiring to make an equally significant impact?
For other young lawyers, you have to just outshine the rest, right? Work harder, work smarter, and do what it takes. Don't just do the absolute bare minimum. Work when your attorneys aren't seeing you, right? That's when you actually put in those hours. It's not just what you're doing in front of your attorney's face, it's what you're doing behind their back, because we see all of that, right? Treat everybody respectfully. You can never be better than any assistant or paralegal or janitor at the office. Those people, when you're coming in as a young lawyer, they have a lot more weight than you do. And you have to earn that respect. And if you just work hard and really put the effort in to go to networking events, to learn from everybody that you can, ask questions, don't be afraid, you're going to be successful. But if you just kind of put in just enough effort to get there, this business, unfortunately, you're not going to cut it. You really need to do everything that you can, put in those hours on the weekends, put them in at night, and it's going to pay off in the long run.
That's great advice, Kim. Thank you for sharing that. Final question for you. What is one question that I should have asked you, but I didn't?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I guess why I love what I do, right? I still wake up every day and am so excited to get to work, right? And that's what you have to find in life. If that is not what you're doing, then you're in the wrong profession. I absolutely love it. I go home every night knowing that I changed somebody's life. I changed a law. I helped save a life. And I really don't know too many other professions besides, firefighters or doctors or police officers that can truly say that. I didn't necessarily know in law school that was going to be where I was going to be ending up, but it is so wonderful at the end of the night when I'm resting my head on my pillow to say, I made a difference, and because of me, something is going to be safer. A child is not going to drown. Someone's not going to be sexually assaulted because we have these new policies implemented. And to be able to say that, I mean, it is the most rewarding career that anyone could ever have. And if this is something that anyone's interested in, I would so recommend this because it is just so uplifting at the end of the day to truly make an impact in our community and in other people's lives.
Thank you, Kim. That's wonderful advice and a wonderful way to close our conversation. Thank you so much for your time and insights. I really appreciate it and enjoyed my time speaking with you.
Thanks for having me. I loved it. It was a great time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Litigator's Edge podcast, brought to you by Threadio.